everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am so sorry that we have been MIA since my last post. If you don't follow us on social media, you're in for a treat because it has been a wild July. But there's a lot to catch up on, so I'm gonna jump right into this vlog and give you guys a pregnancy update because like I said, it's been a pretty crazy month. All right, so today I am 35 weeks pregnant and 3 days? Yeah, 3 days. It's July 30th and this has been a crazy month. I am going to link for you guys my Instagram right here. I'm gonna show where you can catch up kind of on our Instagram stories because I've mostly been sharing it there. I haven't been sharing on YouTube or Facebook. But I have been in and out of the hospital the entire month of July for preterm labor. So I'm gonna start at the very beginning and get you guys caught up to where we are today and kind of what the next, couple weeks looks for us. So Saturday, July 6th, we had a family reunion for my husband's side of the family and was there all afternoon, was enjoying the day. I was feeling pretty good. And we left like midday. I wanna say it was like 2 o'clock, somewhere around there, maybe 1:32. And I started having what I thought were Braxton Hicks contractions, and I was feeling pretty uncomfortable, but I just figured, hey, this is Braxton Hicks, not a big deal. Came home and laid down. I fell asleep for maybe like 20 minutes, got up and went to the bathroom, and I went to wipe and I had bloody discharge. And I knew right away that something wasn't right because I was still having what I thought were Braxton Hicks, but at this point I figured they were actual contractions. I would say that they were maybe at that point 4 or 5 minutes apart, 7 minutes apart. So I ended up calling the hospital, the labor and delivery, and I talked to a triage nurse and they said, well, I think you should probably come in and get checked and see what's going on. I was 32 weeks pregnant at that time, I want to say. And so I was feeling very anxious and nervous about what was happening and what was going on. We got to the hospital and I got checked for, in the triage area, and immediately a ton of things came up. So I was dehydrated and they hooked me up to an IV. They hooked us up to monitors, and then they ended up doing, a urine test. They had me give a urine sample. Based on that, it looked definitely like I was dehydrated. And then they tested for a UTI as well as a yeast infection. Anyways, did all of those tests and those things came back positive. I was still having contractions when we got to the hospital, so they checked me and I was 1 centimeter dilated. And the baby was still high, my cervix was still thick, so that was good, good news, reassuring news. But definitely there was a lot of concerns. So they did a test to check to see my risk for preterm labor, which isn't totally accurate, specifically because I was bleeding, and that obviously came back as well positive. So there was a ton of stuff going on initially when we got to the hospital, and they told me that I would be admitted to the hospital for continued observation because they were giving me a medicine to help stop the contractions, and it was working and slowing it down. So it was a lot to take in. Obviously this came out of nowhere. We weren't planning on it, and it was a lot to take in all at one time. We weren't sure if the baby was gonna deliver. They gave me a shot to mature his lungs, and then kind of started talking to me about what does this look like if I have a 32-week baby and we ended up delivering. I was admitted to the hospital that night, and I was in the hospital until the following Tuesday for observation. So they put me on medicine to stop the preterm labor, and that did work. They treated my yeast infection and my UTI, which ended up on the long culture coming back negative, that I did not have a UTI. I only had a yeast infection. And we were trying to pinpoint what was going on to cause the preterm labor as well as kind of the bleeding. At that point, basically what we were able to draw a conclusion to was that the yeast infection was agitating my uterus, which can cause the contractions without, really further dilation or effacement. And then they pulled me off the medicine to stop preterm labor to see how my body would do. I passed all of those checks and was able to go home. I was discharged on Tuesday with a low activity restriction at that time. So the plan was to have me, you know, not be really doing a ton, but it wasn't full bed rest. I ended up getting home. The next day, we were, you know, had a normal day. Everything seemed fine. Wednesday night at, I want to say it was like late in the evening, so probably 11, 12 o'clock at night, I got up to go to the bathroom and I passed a pretty significant sized blood clot and started bleeding. So again, called the hospital. They said, we need you to come back. And I was having contractions again at that point when I passed that clot. I was really emotional that second time having to come back to the hospital. I'd been at my home for like 36 hours after being gone from Saturday to Tuesday. The girls missed me. My husband obviously was missing me, being a single dad and trying to take everything on unexpectedly. There was just a lot of things going on. So this was not in the cards, but it was what, you know, happened. And I ended up, so late Wednesday night into Thursday morning, getting triaged. They started me again on the medicine to stop my labor, hooked me up to an IV, monitored the baby. At that point, I was still 1 centimeter dilated. I'm trying to go back and like rack my brain. Yeah, I'm pretty sure at that point I was still 1. No, I'm sorry. At that point I was 3 centimeters dilated. So I had progressed. The baby was still high though. My cervix wasn't effaced. So here we went again. They admitted me to the hospital for continued observation for the baby. At that point, because I was having bleeding and I was having more significant bleeding than the bleeding that I had prior, it wasn't just kind of discharge bleeding, it was clotted bleeding that I was passing. They had me stay in the hospital. I ended up meeting with a perinatal doctor who's like a high-risk OB. We did a video chat consult with my OB and myself and the perinatal doctor in the hospital to talk about, you know, kind of what do we look for now? What do we test for now? The initial thought was that because I had the placenta previa early on, that there were still remaining vessels from where that previa placement was early in the pregnancy. And as my cervix begins to change, it was dislodging that, causing the bleeding, the agitation, and the contractions. So they scheduled me to meet with a perinatal OB and do a perinatal ultrasound, a level 2 ultrasound, once I was discharged with the hospital. But unfortunately, I had to stay in the hospital until the bleeding stopped. And then I had to, once the bleeding stopped, I had to stay for another 24 to 48 hours. So my second hospital stay, I started, let me go back and look at my calendar because my dates are all messed up. So I started on the 11th of July and I did not get home until the 15th of July. So from the 6th to the 9th I was in the hospital, and then the 11th to the 15th. When they discharged me the second time, I was put on modified bed rest. I was given medication, the same meds that I was taking in the hospital to stop preterm labor. I had to take that every 8 hours. And I was sent home with that to continue until I hit 36 weeks pregnant. We had, you know, I was so nervous and anxious coming home because I was just wanting to stay home. I didn't want to go back to the hospital and have to stay. And thankfully things quieted down once I got home and I was on bed rest and on medicine. It's been an adventure and an adjustment for my family. My husband is amazing. He has been the best help, even though it's really difficult for me and sometimes I get impatient with him. He has been the best dad and husband picking up everything that I can't do, because at this point, you know, I can't drive, I can't really do a whole lot around the house. So I was on very low activity. I was home for a week, and then I went to my normal OB appointment the following Monday after I was discharged, and was checked again, and I had not progressed anymore. I was still 3 centimeters dilated, and the baby was still high, and I had not had any more bleeding or contractions since I had gotten home. So everything was looking really good. On Thursday, this last Thursday, we met with our perinatal doctor and had our level 2 ultrasound to check out the baby. They looked at the baby's, you know, entire growth, and he is a rock star. He has been so unaffected the whole time by everything that's been going on, whether we were in the hospital being monitored or anytime they've checked him, he's been unfazed. His heart rate is great. My health, my heart rate, all of, you know, blood pressure, everything has been fine. So the only thing we've had is this kind of recurrent issue of bleeding. We met with the perinatal doctors, and they measured him, and he is measuring way ahead on everything. I make big babies, like I talked about in my last video. We were thinking that he was going to be about 9 pounds if he's full term. Last week at the perinatal doctor, he was measuring 6 pounds 14 ounces. So he was right around 7 pounds. You know, again, that's within 15 to 20% accuracy. But the perinatal doctor did not see an abruption of my placenta, which was one of the concerns we had that was causing bleeding, which means the placenta is starting to pull away from the uterus. And there was no signs of an abruption. And there was also no signs of remaining blood vessels from the placenta previa that I had early on. So we got really good news that things looked well. I had a good weekend. I was probably a little bit more active this past weekend than I should have been, but for the most part was still pretty much on bed rest. Sunday afternoon, I started feeling kind of agitated, and I thought it was just kind of like gassy digestion cramps, but ended up, you know, going to sleep Sunday night, woke up around midnight, and, you know, was still kind of not feeling the best. Ended up getting up about 12:50 in the morning, and I had a huge blood clot and huge bleeding again. And I immediately was concerned because it was significantly more than the bleeding that I had had prior. And I knew now that we were in that 35-week mark that if I go into labor, we're gonna have this baby. So we ended up going back to labor and delivery. They checked me. I was 4 centimeters dilated, 50% effaced, and the baby was at a -2 station. So we were making progress, more than we have ever. They hooked me up to monitors. They watched me for over an hour, checked me again. I was having contractions every 2 to 4 minutes. And so I was pretty convinced we were gonna, you know, kick into active labor and have this little guy. Thankfully, nothing changed, and you know, my cervix didn't progress even though I was having the contractions. With all of that said, they sent me home again to stay on bed rest and try to keep this little guy cooking as much as we can until he hits full term. I had a meeting with my OB doctor today to talk about kind of where we're at, and based on all of the things that the high-risk doctors have seen, I've met with 2 high-risk doctors now, along with my OB, plus the hospital visits we've had, plus this issue of recurrent bleeding. The best and safest thing for the baby and I is to be induced once we hit 37 weeks. Once we hit 37 weeks, and I know there's varying opinions on this, but the only thing that matters is the doctors that have dealt with me and my son and my body, is that 37 weeks is a full-term baby. And because of the risk that we've had with recurrent bleeding, it puts me at a higher risk to hemorrhage. It puts me at a higher risk for a C-section if we don't deliver the baby at 37 weeks. So that is currently our plan. We will be induced and have this little guy. If I don't go into labor, and I'm really hoping that I don't prior to that, we'll be induced on the 10th to meet this little guy and have him earthside, because at this point the risks of me continuing on into the later stages of pregnancy are just not the best for him or I. So I said a lot in that, you know, recapture of time, but it's just been a super stressful July, honestly. Being on bed rest, being in and out of the hospital, it's really taken a toll on my family, on me, and it's reassuring to know that the baby is healthy. He's still in there, and I'm so thankful that we haven't had, you know, a preemie baby, and I'm, again, prayerfully just optimistic that we will make it to 37 weeks with this little guy. We know he's healthy. We know he's looking good. We've looked at all his vital organs. His weight looks great. So I don't know what else to say. I will, again, there's a lot more details in my Instagram story that I shared as well. So if you want to go follow us there, we're at the Dodge Family. You can connect and go back and watch my story feed that I had shared from all that time in the hospital. I don't know if I'll do a vlog next week. I will try, but I can't promise that it'll get done. So connect with us on our social media, because I will obviously have posts there once we actually do have the baby, and pictures and videos all there before it's ever on YouTube. So follow us on Instagram for sure. If you're not already, follow us on Facebook, and I will make sure to share that. I'm gonna show you guys my belly, and then we'll be done. Okay, so this is my 35.5 week belly. So you can see he's a big boy. He's nice and round in there. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for all your prayers, for everybody who has reached out on Instagram, on Facebook, private messaged us. We love you and we appreciate you more than you could ever imagine. So that's it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.